Welcome and thank you all for being here today. Student Life and the Campus Activities Board is happy to bring you these activities every week. And we're also very happy to partner with some of our organizations on campus, some of our departments. And today we have partnered with our Diversity Council that is here in the Fort Wayne and Warsaw campus. And to head us off from our Diversity Council is Mr. Christopher Wiley. So I'm going to turn it over to Christopher and he's going to take it from here. Thanks.
Once again, welcome to our fatherhood discussion, the Black family identifying the mystic, the myths and systemic issues that have shaped the narrative of Black men as fathers. And we have a very auspicious panel today of professionals and local fathers that will talk about their experiences with fatherhood. So we will have time for question and answers, and we have a series of questions and each panelist will have their opportunities to respond. We would like for each panelist to keep their responses to 2 to 3 minutes so everyone has a chance to respond and we hear everyone's perspective. At this time, I'd like for the panelists to introduce themselves. And when you introduce yourself, tell us your role or your position, and then also talk to us about your experience with fatherhood. And we'll start with Dr. Hammonds.
All right, thank you very much. Brother Riley is what I call him, Mr. Riley.
Yes.
Grand day, everybody. My name is Dr. Martez Hammonds, and I identify as he, him, and his. And I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Purdue Fort Wayne, right across the street, the first Chief Diversity Officer. And I like to always start by saying I'm high and happy and peacock proud to have the opportunity to speak before any crowd, anywhere, any day, anytime. And especially you all today. And so I'm unique. I'm probably one of the most unique ones out of the group today that's going to be presenting. My introduction to fatherhood is somewhat different. It's not biologically as a father, but I serve as the best uncle in the world to 12 nieces and nephews and 3 great nieces and nephews as well. And so I have had the awesome privilege of helping to rear them up in the way they should go. And so when they get older, they should depart from it. And not only that, I've served in mentorships. Right now, the longest is 24 years, actually, mentoring one young man as well as his father figure to him through middle school, high school, through the Army, and now into his career. And so that's the way I show up in this place and space. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hammonds. At this time, we'll hear from Mr. Watley.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Jonathan Wiley. I'm the president and CEO of Building a Stronger Family, a nonprofit located right here in Fort Wayne. My introduction to fatherhood was a little different because my mom raised 7 kids by herself and I never knew who my dad was growing up. And we'll talk about the impact of moms trying to be both moms and dads later on. So it can have a negative or a positive impact for you. So I have 2 kids. I've got a 32-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old son who I've been really active in their life. But the thing that I want to hone in on is when you don't know your father, you can go one way or the other. The other way is you can start having kids and not care if they know you, or you can start having kids and you want to be impactful in their life because you have that pain of not knowing who your own dad was growing up. The thing about me is going through this reactive lifestyle of understanding that I wanted my kids to know me, but I still had the pain of not knowing who my dad was. So how did that negatively impact me in being a father? So now in areas where I should have been more stern and more in a parental role, I was trying to be their friend because I had that pain of not knowing who my own dad was constantly in the back of my mind. So that was a both good and a bad thing. So having gone through some reactive lifestyle training, understanding that, I was able to get some of that baggage off of me and not pass it on to my kids. So again, I'm glad this conversation is happening. I think we're going to get to the bone that surrounds and underlines the meat in this conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Watley. And now we'll hear from Mr. Green.
Hi guys, I am Kenneth Green. I would say my role, I'm an entrepreneur now. In the past, I've had in my career, I've done a lot of social work. So I've worked as a juvenile probation officer, and I recently left my job to work full time with my wife in our business at SCAN as a fatherhood engagement worker in that realm. So I guess my introduction to fatherhood came from, of course, my son 10 years ago when he was born. And my experience with fatherhood, just wanting to not, I think for me, when I became a father, I didn't want my kids to feel what I felt as a child not having a father. So that was kind of my mission going into it. Like, I don't want them to feel that pain that I felt. I want them to feel something totally different that I don't even know anything of. I don't know the feeling of it. So I want them to experience that. So that's just been my mission, of course, going into it. And that's not just the only thing, because I love my kids and I love being around them and I want to be around them. But that has been kind of something that hits in the back of my head every day, just the daily things that we do. Like, you know what, that is so awesome you get to do this. I'm so happy you get to do this with your dad, things like that. So that's kind of where my introduction comes from with fatherhood.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And last but certainly not least, we'll hear from Mr. Bosley.
All right, thank you, Brother Riley. Again, I have to say this now that the call started. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. But I am a husband. My wife is on the call. I'm a father, brother. And I like to explain it this way. I am a spreader of good news, and I'm also a sorter of bad news, meaning I am a minister as well as a mental health counselor. I serve at 2 agencies, Courageous Healing, and I also serve as a mental health counselor at Cross Connections. And my introduction to fatherhood came, I would say, when me and my wife got together. I have a bonus daughter. She's 12 now, but I came in her life at 2. I literally thought let me say this. I have a 3-year-old son now, and I have to say my wife is a great mother. I'm not trying to earn brownie points. But by me coming into my daughter's life at 2, I just immediately thought I was going to just be this fantastic father because Sydney made me look good, because my wife did such a wonderful job at raising her. So my introduction kind of blew my head up because I'm thinking like, oh, I got this father thing down pat. Like Mr. Wiley, I grew up, my father wasn't active, so I had some type of insecurity. But when I came in Sydney's life and she made me look good, it made me think like, you know what? I'm not going to miss a beat. And then Cole happened. And my 3-year-old son, I love him to death, but he happened and it kind of showed me, I would say having to parent him from the stages where I missed with Sydney kind of exposed the fact that Mr. Watley was speaking to, that a lot of my parenting was not just structured, but it was influenced by my past trauma of what I didn't have. So my introduction to fatherhood was unique because I got the joy of being not just a bonus father, but a biological father. But even with that joy was great sorrow because I recognized that even though I wanted to show up, I couldn't show up fully because I had this injury that I never healed. So that was my introduction to fatherhood, and I'm still being introduced to it. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Riley.
Mr. Bosley, I want you to continue to have the mic and weigh in on the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go to the next question, I'm reminded of something that T.D. Jakes once shared. We see our children as miracles, and I found myself in this own quandary, is that sometimes it's difficult to correct the miracle.
That's good.
And then 2, when you have to correct the you out of a child.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let that sit there for a moment.
Yeah.
Come back to that a little later. But what do you want the audience to know about Black fathers, and what do you see as the biggest misconception or the misrepresentation? And again, we'll have Mr. Bosley start.
All right, great question. I'm going to keep this very simple. I would say what I want the audience to know when it comes to Black fathers is that we're here. And despite what media or what your personal experience has been like, we're here and we voluntarily want to take on the responsibility of being a father. We're not, and the misrepresentation is that we're just out here having kids and we just run. from this role. But I want the audience to know, and anyone else who tunes in, that we're here and we're just excited as mothers. We're just as willing as mothers to be here, but also to be active, as well as to be effective. Yeah. So I just keep it simple with that.
Thank you, Mr. Bosley. Mr. Green.
Yes, I would love to teeter onto that. I totally agree with that 100%. I always feel like that's a big misrepresentation about Black fathers. We are here. And one of the other ones is that we don't like love on our kids. Like I am the most emotionally connected person. Like I just love touching and feeling and hugging and kissing. My son, he's 7 now, 7 and 10, Aiden's 10, Noah's 7. And they're at this age now where they won't give me a kiss. I'm like, give your dad a kiss. You know, I love you. I still want to show you that love. I still want to show you that affection, because we can still be men and do this and love on each other. And I just want them to know that. And so they were like, okay, Dad. And they kissed me, but it was weird for them, of course. But I just want to continue to show them it doesn't matter how old you are, what step you become as a man, you still show love, you still embrace. And that's I think one of the biggest misconceptions as well that I like for myself personally to share along my social media platforms and whatever, just to show that part of what Black fatherhood does, for sure.
Mr. Watley.
I'd have to agree with Mr. Bosley and Mr. Green. The biggest misnomer is the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So you look at the numbers for incarceration, you look at the number for single parent households, and those are the ones that social media blast. Those are the ones that are out there on Front Street, from the crime rate to Black fathers in general don't care. So how do you create a new norm if it's not having conversations like this? Because what we do isn't glamorized. We love on our family and dedicated to our family and showing love to our kids. It's not pretty, it's not attractive. And that's not what society wants to see from Black individuals, especially men. They want to see you going to jail. They want to see you in the orange. They want to see broken families, because that narrative is what they know. Yep. The narrative has to change by the conversations like this, and also putting us on Front Street. What happens when you start having a great Black Father Day and every Black father around the United States is heralded for doing what's right, for openly loving on their wife and their kids, and showing society we can break the norm, we can break that stereotype? My understanding from where we are even having this conversation takes us to where we're supposed to be. And you also look at society as a whole. Why isn't it attractive for us to be publicized for doing what's right? Where did that come from? Why is it more attractive for them to show us in handcuffs, to show a single mom trying to raise 3 kids on her own, versus to show a family that's intact? I'm dedicated to changing that norm. If I'm not standing by it myself, I'm standing next to these other individuals on this panel to make a difference. So to me, that means a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Watley. Dr. Hammonds.
I just echo all of their sentiments, most definitely. And then just to add is, I want this audience to know that just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And so oftentimes what we are blind to, we believe that may not really exist, but they do exist. And I'll say this, that it's a misrepresentation because they're not on Front Street, as Mr. Watley said, and because the narrative is normally in the hands of the person who has the pen, and oftentimes the Black father doesn't have the pen, sometimes don't have access to the pen, or sometimes they precluded from holding the pen, from whatever which shape, form, or fashion, systemic barrier, whatever you want to call it, puts them in that position. But you cannot always believe that narrative that is before you. For every negative narrative that you see of a Black father, I guarantee you. I guarantee you, we can look across the aisle and see that of any other race, any other culture as well. And so keep that in mind when we're talking about Black fathers. We cannot, every time we hear the word Black fathers, think from a deficit mindset, right? We have to look from a positive mindset, an asset mindset, because we have been taught in America to see Black men, Black and brown bodies, especially men, whether they're fathers or not, from a deficit mindset. And so we have to keep that in perspective. And we have to keep that in perspective as we're teaching each other, and not only teaching each other, teaching our children and teaching children that are coming up who's looking at us. And so just like the fella said, all of them have hit the major points, and I cannot agree more than what they said already. It's so true.
Thank you, Dr. Hammonds. And I would like for you to take the next question. Share how you might mentor or parent boys differently than girls, and talk about your role as a nurturer.
Well, let me just keep going, right? Let me just keep going on what I'm just talking about. Because we know the path that has been laid before us. We know the statistics, and we also know the reality. We know the reality of what, I have a brother. I have 3 brothers. They're all dads. And I know what the narrative is about them, for them, that isn't even them. And that's sad, right? And so as I'm mentoring and as I help parent their children, I do talk to my fellows different, and in a way that is realistic, and that's true. Some of you may have heard of this in light of recent news. There is a talk that we have with Black and brown people, but there is a talk that we have with our Black and brown boys and men. And it's from how we react to law enforcement, how you are in public, how you should treat women, how you should have that conversation, and all those things. We have a different conversation with our African-American boys, and rightly so. And so I tell Black men, I tell our Black and brown men and boys, I love you every time I have the chance. And that's that new part of nurturing that I believe that we sometimes miss, and sometimes we don't get, because we may have had fathers that have been in and out, but we can't look at the deficit mindset to it, right? And so that's kind of the way I am. My nurturing is, as an uncle, is I get to take those kids, I get to take those men, those boys, have conversations with them, take them out to eat, get them all hyped up, and then take them back to their dads who get really mad because they can't go to sleep, etc. So I show up a little differently there.
Mr. Bosley.
I'm going to piggyback everything that he said. It was very good. Again, I'm in a unique situation because my daughter is 12, my son is 3. And he's not necessarily at the age where I'm able to answer the question, I feel, honestly, but I do, like Dr. Hammond said, I have been in different roles where I have certain nephews and cousins that look up to me. In that way, I would say with my daughter, and my wife's on the call, so it's like, I got to be totally honest. With my daughter, it's unique, just simply because I parent her in the sense of, I'm a big communicator. I love loving on her. I love accepting her, as well as I love pushing her to use her words. Now, when it comes to my son, although he's 3, I definitely recognize myself challenging him to use his words. And even when he is emotional, I don't want to use the word demand, but I still challenge him at 3 to gather himself. And before I go in to soothe, or even if I do soothe, we're going to walk away with you using your words, being able to explain why you're at this point. And I do that simply, and again, it goes back to this whole parenting thing. I do that just simply because, one, as a Black male, you have to be able to use your words, because your silence, unfortunately, works against you, because they are fill in the blank. And when I say they, is not no particular group, I'm using everyone else will fill in the blank. So even at 3, I start and I parent him to be able, whether I like to hear it, whether my wife Cherish likes to hear it, we need to use your words. Even if it's unclear as goo goo gaga, let me hear you say goo goo gaga. Because I want you to get in the habit that even though you hit me with emotion, also hit me with your verbal understanding, with your understanding. And even when it comes to a nurturer, I would say I'm naturally a nurturer in that sense that, like Mr. Green stated, I like loving on my kids. I love the simple things, just as hearing their stories, how their day is going, and really affirming them. And I know there's some of the people on here that work with me, so they know naturally I'm a positive person in the sense of encouraging. So the same way that I encourage maybe the people I work with, I'm very intentional about doing that with the people I live with, especially when it comes to my children. So when it comes to that nurturing aspect, I make sure that I am emotionally supporting them and loving them in a way that they don't walk out the house feeling deprived. Let's just say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bosley. Mr. Watley.
That's a hard act to follow. I'm understanding that even kids that aren't your kids are your kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a minister too by heart. And I used to bring young kids into my house, and I would call it monkey bread day. So we'd be in the kitchen and we would make monkey bread. And those of you with a sweet tooth know what monkey bread is.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the fact that we were baking, it was the fact that I was setting an atmosphere to show them that it was okay to talk. Now, I might not be saying anything different than what their parents were saying, but sometimes it's a different voice saying the same thing. And to Mr. Bosley's point, sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So you gravitate that with an understanding of, okay, you're not my biological child, but God put you in my presence, so you're my child. So let me pour something into your cup that you might not necessarily get from someplace else to make a difference. To understand who we are is bigger than your household. So if your environment is good, if everybody in your family is happy, then you're obligated to spread that same goodness to somebody else. When you talk about nurturing different between men and girls, especially in the Black community, our young ladies have this low self-esteem that's automatically built in when they get to a certain age. And what happens is they try to do what Felicia across the street is doing. And they start changing the DNA on who they are. So now they'll take their own self-esteem and then they'll sell it out to fit in. They'll sell it out to get the boy that is the quarterback on the team. So there's two things that have to happen. We have to show the young women that you have to value yourself more than what somebody else does. And then from a boy's standpoint, you have to show them that that is a precious jewel in how you treat the opposite sex. Our Black men get a bad rap for one, not showing their emotions, and two, how we quote unquote treat the women in our lives. And it's usually a reflection of mother or absent father that goes back to how that plays itself out. And we talk a little bit later about reactive lifestyle. You'll see how if we never go back to get that first scab off, to get that first hurt off, it starts migrating into our life and it starts showing up in our kids. It starts showing up into our spouse. And then all of a sudden you have a young lady that's growing up. She's like, well, I just got out of an abusive relationship, and she doesn't know systemically she starts attracting the same characteristics in the next man because that's the nature of what she's used to. How do you break those stigmas unless we're starting to pour into both our boys what's right, but also not what we're saying, what we're doing? I never forget, I used to have a conversation with my son. I'd say, I don't like the fact that you take your shoes off and don't untie them. It bothered me. Till one day I look down and I'm taking my shoes off without untying them. If we don't put actions to our words, our children will hone in more to what we do than what we say.
Thank you, Mr. Watley. Well said. Mr. Green.
Oh, so I got some time to really think about this, which is such a loaded question, but such a question that I think I'm in the midst of this right now. I feel now I was a boy dad for a while now. I mean, my daughter is just born last year, 2 years ago. She'll be 2 in May. And so I'm in the midst of seeing this difference, right, between boy and girl, and what do I need to do differently for her, and what do I need to do differently for them? And where I corresponded with is the social issues that I'm starting to see that I'm starting to recognize that they're going through already. So like for the boys, Aiden's 10, Noah's 7, And for the longest, when they were about baby to about, I'd say 5, they would get, oh, you're so cute, you're so cute, you're so, oh, I love them, oh, they're so adorable. You know, I get that so much. And now, since they're getting older, 7 and 10, there's people are starting to recognize them as being older than what they actually are. And that scares me, because I'm like, they're just children, you know, they're my babies. And for you to look at my 10-year-old, he's just such a joy, and he's so like-minded with everybody. He just thinks everyone is just great, and he's learning a lot. He has so many questions. So I just feel like socially I'm starting to learn, okay, now I have to let him know that, you know, people are seeing you in a different light now. It's not just that you're this cute little toddler boy anymore, because now they're recognizing you as older. And that kind of, it makes me kind of off-putting, because I'm like, he's only 10, or no, they're only 7. So I have to, you know, now teach them certain things and say, hey, look, this is what we have to start working on. This is what we have to start thinking about. And these are certain actions we have to start thinking about, because now people think you're like 12, 13 years old, and you're not. You're just a baby. And then for my daughter, I just feel like making sure she recognizes her beauty, and knowing that her natural hair is just beautiful. And so I like to buy her these dolls that reflect who she is and what she's all about and what she looks like. And recently they had the Black Cinderella Brandy come out in Disney Plus. And for me, that was a big deal, because I remember growing up watching that. But now for her to be able to see a Black princess, like she won't know any different. She'll just see a Black princess, you know, in the tiara. And so I look at it in that way right now, because I'm in the midst of it. So you're able to see the social issues that you see out there, you hear about all the time, and now you recognize it in your children as they grow as well. So I think that's where my difference in parenting a boy versus a girl comes with, is looking at those things and just making sure that they're protected and loved, and knowing that they're still great, you know, and not to make it so doom and gloom, but just to teach them just a little bit, to recognize just a little bit, you know. I don't know, that's the best way I could kind of explain it.
Well, that's an excellent segue to our next question. And I want you to keep the mic, Mr. Green. How has systemic racism impacted the role of the Black male within the family? And what is your biggest fear for your children?
Well, I guess for me, I can relate to that for my children as well, but also for my wife, and just going through the motions of her pregnancies, and when she would deliver, and worrying about, you know, making sure if doctors are actually hearing her. And we've had so many instances throughout her pregnancies where they weren't hearing her, they weren't listening to her, and it could have, you know, gone astray if I had not had that education on what Black women are going through during pregnancies. And so as a father, me as a husband, I recognized that going in, you know, not until probably the second baby. And then the third baby, I was on it, you know. So, and then pregnancy and delivery with Kinsley. And so that made me wanting to be more on it. So I think for me, it's just educating myself on not even knowing, because you think, you know, you go to the hospital, people are going to treat you. They're going to take care of you. So I think for me, that's what I'm thinking of. I get it from my experience that my wife has had delivering. Have gotten the way that they've gotten. So I then can trickle that down to my kids and say, okay, I need to recognize this. I need to educate myself on this, and educate them as well. And just let them know, you know, things to look for, signs that they need to do to protect themselves. So that's kind of where it trickles down for me, is with my wife, actually, to fatherhood.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Dr. Hammonds.
This is not a fair question. As a chief diversity officer, having to answer this question in 1 or 2 minutes, it's not fair. Let me just quickly say that systemic racism does and has had a huge impact in the, I would say, the Black experiences for Black males. experiences for Black people in general, but we're talking about Black males and the family. What I can tell you, because it's Black History Month, happy Black History Month, everybody, just to reiterate that. Since 1619, come on, somebody. Since 1619, when enslaved Africans were brought over here and hit and touched down in Virginia, that then and there started the Black experiences for males, right? Oftentimes it was many males that were brought first, the history will point to, and then families began to come over as millions of Africans, West Africans came over to not only America, but South America. You all know the story, right? Since then, as not being, has been recognized less than human, folks, has really began that systemic racism, and our unconscious minds begin to believe everything we've been taught, heard, passed down from people that we love, including our pastors, our teachers, our friends, our families, etc. So systemic racism plays a huge impact on how how we see folks who look like us Black African-American males on this call, right? I am not Dr. Hammonds when I'm walking around in the street. I'm just another Black male figure. That's called unconscious bias, right? And everything that a person thinks about that they have learned that's been stored in the back of their mind to create these snap judgments, that's unconscious bias. That's due to systemic racism. Ooh, Kenneth, you almost made me jump off the call just 2.5 seconds ago talking about the mortality rate of our sisters compared to the mortality rate of our sisters' counterparts. It's almost 14 times more that they die during maternity. Y'all, that's huge. That is huge. So why wouldn't a Black male not care about that, right? When they see their wife in pain and they're telling folks who are paid to care for us, right, that they're in pain, and they said, no, she's okay. I understand this. You're not the doctor. So again, that we're seeing that play out every day with COVID. We're seeing that play out. And I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to say it in any kind of chauvinistic way or anything like that, misogynistic way. As a person who grew up in faith, with the Black male supposed to be the head of the house, but to be stripped of all that we are quote unquote supposed to be, how do you do that? How can you do that? How can you be this head of the household? How can you be this provider, etc., when constantly, systemically, you're being stripped? Yeah. You're being stripped of those opportunities, that access, etc., etc., etc. And so I'll stop there, but I'm just saying, yes, systemic racism plays a major role. I told you all we shouldn't think of deficit thinking. And so since we know this history, it is our job to really rewrite the narrative, and not really rewrite the narrative, but show our kids and show our folks that there's better, that you don't have to, subscribe to the narratives that folks have already laid out before you. And so it's huge. And we are going to be the people, like they're going to listen to us. We're going to role model it. And so hopefully they do just that. I got to stop.
Mr. Bosley, thank you, Dr. Hammonds. Well said.
Just to piggyback on what Mr. Green and Dr. Hammond said, very, 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 very detailed and good. I would say I'm going to marry both of those questions together with my answer. I would say this. One of my favorite books literally enclosed a saying from a writer who was, I think it's Psalms 23, but when he was saying, they all walk through the valleys of the shadows of death. He said, I will fear no evil, went on, but the shadows of death. And to me, I took from that is that sometimes the threat, not the actual thing, but the shadow of certain things is enough to create anxiety that is just as great as the real thing, right? And with this, when it comes to systemic racism, I don't even have to go into detail because the other speakers have already, and I know Mr. Wiley is going to seal the deal in explaining, is that just that constant shadow of this, that no matter what I do, I also have to fit in the equation of, all right, what else is up against me? What else is in place that I have to try to overcome? Does that make sense? And the fear of that, the anxiety that comes from that is something that I wear as a shadow every single day. So how does that necessarily affect me, or what fear does that create when it comes to my kids is that I am afraid. I don't use the word afraid, so let me get my words correct. I would say this, is that because systemic racism is there, it very easily can influence sometime how I feel about myself, just because of that known deficit that's out there, right? And sometimes, because we can sometimes believe other people's perception about us, it's very easy that I could take that on as my identity, even if it contradicts my skill or my ability, right? And my fear is this for my kids living in this world, is that my kids will grow up, get from under my protection, and take on someone else's identity. Or as Mr. Wiley mentioned earlier, will rechange their DNA. And that is a fear of mine, is that they will go out there and they will put themselves on sale because the world says you're not worth charging people the regular price. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watley.
All I can say is amen to that, Mr. Bosley, Dr. Hammond, Mr. Green. Systemic racism, I always go back to one of my favorite quotes of Harriet Tubman, as she says that she could have freed so many more slaves if they knew they were free. The thing about the early days of slavery, it set the tone for what we live in now. So in the beginning, they had to grab the biggest and beat them in front of everybody, but they didn't have to after that. When slaves were freed, a lot of them didn't go anywhere because they knew, even though the physical chains were gone, the emotional chains were still there. So they were still in bondage, even though they were free. We all probably on this panel that have been in situations where we've been pulled over for speeding or what have you, there's a different application for Black people than it is white people. And I'll never forget having a conversation with my son on how to handle himself when he's pulled over. And why did I have to have that conversation? Because the inclination is he can't talk to him the way other people can talk to an officer when he's pulled over, because two things happen. I'm under the belief that most racists don't know they're racist. They were just raised that way. And how they act is subject to how they've been empowered as a youth. So as they're raised, they don't know that they have this underlying racism in them. They just treat people differently than themselves. So when my son got pulled over and he came in and had a conversation about what happened, he remembered everything that I told him, because the main focus is for our kids to come back home safe and well, right? But the other thing that really bothers is, why do I have to have the talk? I never forget, I used to work in Huntington in 1985. This was predominantly all white community. And I had a hangman noose in my locker at work. And I had the understanding of two things. Well, one, I need a paycheck, so you're not going to stop me from coming to work. Two, and this is one of the things that bothers me about some Black people, is we put everybody in the same box. So now I hate all white people. Because of this one issue, I'm putting everybody there. And some Caucasians do it with Black people as well. We're all lazy. We're all no good for nothing. We all this, that, and the other. So when you talk about systemic racism and the after effects, you look at how it affects us mentally, like Mr. Bosley said, more than ever. Does it start changing who you are? Does it start changing how you treat other people? Does it change the essence of who you are? And I tell my kids all the time, you're a book. Every day somebody reads you, but don't let somebody else write your book. That's the most important thing, because when somebody else starts writing your book, the author is no longer you. I'm gonna leave that there because that could lead to another hour and a half sermon. But in essence, when you look at even the events of the past couple of weeks where the young men were brutally murdered, and you look at how that was handled, and I was looking at the whole procedure, how this man was arrested and going downtown and realizing there's not a hate crime in Indiana, right? So from the top to the bottom. If you don't know there's a problem, is there a problem? If we the ones that are continuing to shout that there's a problem, but nobody's listening, is there a problem? If the lawmakers don't deem that there is a problem, is there a problem? When our young Black men think all cops are not worthy, is that a problem? That's a problem, because all cops aren't bad cops. So we have to departmentalize that. Don't let systemic racism, as Mr. Bosley say, change the essence of who you are, because then you feed into the narrative that helps them write your book. Yes. I'm gonna leave that there, Mr. Riley.
It's all good. Very well said. What advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now? And we'll let Mr. Watley start.
That's a good question, because I've talked to my younger self at 56 years old and understanding that who you are can be determined by what's around you. So I say this all the time, and I say it to parents. Sometimes there are dream killers in your own household. So let's say I'm 8th, 9th grade, I run in the house and I say, hey, mom and dad, I want to be a marine biologist. And the first things out of their mouth is, you can't be that. See, now they're equating what they know from their past experience, and they're passing that same bag on to me. So they've taken my dream of possibilities and turned it into impossibilities within my own house. Sometimes it's more the enemy that's within that you have to deal with than the one that's without. So for me to have a conversation with my younger self is believe anything is possible. Try to fight off the naysayers and doubters, even if they're in your own home, because a lot of times what they didn't have present in their life negatively impacts what you have present in your life. And then when that gets on them, it changes the whole DNA. Now you've taken somebody that could have potentially cured cancer that never reaches their mark. Now you turn that into the greatest doctor in history that never reached their mark because nobody in that household ever went to college. And now you're pouring water on my dream from within the system that is supposed to love me and support me. I always tell my younger self that you're not going to always have all cheerleaders. But if you can look in the mirror and understand who you are, it changes the essence of everything around you. My conversation to my younger self is always based off of anything is possible.
Thank you. Mr. Bosley.
Thank you. That was great, Mr. Watley. Let me just say that. I got to keep saying, I'm reiterating, I love being on this panel. You guys are saying some great things. I would say if I had the ability to talk to my younger self, I heard Pastor Mike Todd say this, and it was very good. He says, whatever you don't transform, you transfer. Whatever you don't transform, you transfer. And I would say to my younger self, I would literally say that quote, because as a kid, I always knew I wanted to be a parent. I always knew I wanted to be in the lives of the youth. And a quote like that let me know that, all right, if I don't heal, I'm literally giving my kids, I would say, I'm literally giving my kids something that they didn't even ask for. And so I would use that as encouragement or motivation at that point to prioritize healing. Even though I may be a teen, even though I don't know how young I am with the question, but whatever age I am, it would be to prioritize healing 100%. And a part of prioritizing healing would simply be, I'll tell my younger self, accept that story. Accept your story. Accept your story. I'm gonna say it again, accept your story. Because a lot of us, even as adults, people come to us as help, we're naturally helpers. But the truth is, if we were to pull the covers back, if we had a camera crew following us around, a lot of us do things or excel when it comes to helping because we really don't accept our story. We really don't accept, in the words of Michael Jackson, the man in the mirror. And again, if I haven't accepted myself, if I haven't healed, how will I be able to model that for my kids? And that's the thing that I would say fatherhood is not just exposing, but really showing me. And you see the intergenerational pattern is that just because you have good intent does not pay the bills. Because I can't call the person, my mortgage, and say, hey, I intended to pay it, but I didn't write the check. No. It's either I'm gonna pay it or not, meaning you either going to heal and be this model for your kids. If not, I hate to use the word you're a bad model, but you're modeling the opposite. It's black or white. I'm sorry, there's really no gray area with it. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Bosley. Mr. Green.
I think for me, when I get that question, everyone's responses have been amazing. When I get that question, I go back and I truly think about my younger self and who I was as my younger self. And I just remember being this kid that was not like a lot of people, not like my peers, I guess. You know, when you look at yourself, you know, you see certain interests that your peers have. You don't really have that, you know, and that's okay. But I just was one, you know, I love theater. I love singing. I wasn't that big into sports. I got good grades and I never really got in trouble in school. You know, what my teachers probably would have expected out of me was totally different. And they would shine a light on that all the time. Like, Kenny is just the light of my life and he's the best in the classroom. So I don't know, I think about that person and then I also think about, I've been fortunate to have some strong men in my life. I didn't grow up with my dad, but one strong man I can definitely remember is Chris Dowse. He's in the comments somewhere in here. And I will never forget, he told me this, and he probably does not remember this, but this is on my way to college. I was on my way to college, and he was teaching me how to kind of do my tie and stuff. I didn't know how to do that, but he told me, he said, never let anyone validate you. You know, you are who you are, and that's great. You don't have to find validation from anyone else. And I took that and ran with it throughout my whole entire college career. I ran with it as a father. I ran with it as just a person, because I always remember that. And I always try to remember to tell my kids that, you know, like, just be who you are and just be true to you. Continue to do that. No, I wasn't always true to myself. No, we all go get in these moments where we do need that certification from others, or that validation, or like, oh, what do you think? Do you think this is good for me, or whatever? But you always have to look deep down inside and know that if who you are is going to be someone you want to express and show, just do that. Just be that, and don't feel sorry for it, and don't feel bad for it. And, you know, I'm nice, and I'm just going to be nice, and that's just what it's going to be. I don't know. So I don't know. I just always think I'll just always go back to that. Just never let anyone validate who you are. You have to continue to be who you are, and what is for you is going to move into place, because God has it that way, because you are being your authentic self.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Dr. Hammonds.
Listen, I'm going to be very quick, fast, and I just can't be any deeper than the three I just already heard. Let me tell you. I just want to just share real quick what I just learned right now on this call. Number one is, so two of the brothers talked about, you know, if they were able to talk to their younger self back then, right? And I was like, wow, that's cool. Healing and not validating this, having anybody else to validate yourself. And I'm like, these are all so good. And I'm like, yes, this is y'all talking to me, right? Right now, and I'm 38. I'm 38. Yeah, I'm 38. I just turned 38, y'all. Am I 38? Yeah, I'm 38. I think I'm 38. I just had a birthday. I'm pretty sure I'm 38. Okay, but not but, and so you know, if that was me, I would just, you know, tell myself then, because similar to Kenneth, you know, I grew up in the church and I direct 5 choirs, and I was the model little black boy. Yeah, I started theater in 6th grade and stuff of that nature. So, you know, I didn't do the typical stuff, but I got 10 scholarships to go to college because of my behavior and who I kind of was, right? So I would just say, you know, mess up. Like, it's okay to mess up, younger self. Then Wiley just wore me out just 2.5 seconds ago, because he said, when I talk to my younger self, y'all, we cannot negate and disregard that even our younger self continues to reside in who we are today. Some of us, as we started off talked about some of either the trauma, the hurt, or some of the things that we may have went through when we were younger, right? And we still carry some of that today. So when that brother kept saying, and as I talk to my younger self, and when I talk to my younger self, the light came on like, Doc, some of the issues that you have, why don't you talk to your younger self? Because he still resides up in you. So you need to be like, bro, 12-year-old, this is not the time nor the place. That was then. Let's try to do this differently. Bro, Wiley, you have wore me out over here. Like because I did not think to, yeah, we do, but when you call it out, sometimes you just got to call it out. Call out the fact that even your younger self is still carried through. You still carry some of the same things that happened, the same things that you went through. My. I'm over here like blown away because I'm thinking now some of the situations that I've been in, that I've carried over, that I've carried with me. I could have just said, younger self, chill, right? Like, I know you here, you still exist, but chill out. Like, this is not the time or the place, or younger self, some of the things I used to do that I cherished doing back then, you know what? Activate yourself, show yourself up, right? This is what you need. This is the time, younger self, you need to be present right now. Oh, y'all got me over here with this cognitive dissonance like nobody's business. It's just stuff going on. Get me off this call. I'm done talking. I'm mute myself.
Well, Mr. Bosley, we want you to weigh in on the next question. In your role as a father figure or father, how do you have conversations about morality and sexuality when there are so many poor examples highlighted by the media?
All right. Great question. And I'm definitely looking forward to how the others answer that. I would say for me, again, I am young. I'm like we established earlier. I think I am the youngest person on the panel, as well as being a young parent. So let me say, my response is not a blueprint. All right, it's not a blueprint. I'm still trying to figure that out. But by me being a subscriber to Christianity, when it comes to certain conversations, how I parent or how I view certain things when it comes to morality, as well as sexuality, is heavily influenced by what I subscribe to. So when it comes to that, however, whatever question I'm met with, oftentimes it will be influenced by what it is I believe or that falls under the practice of Christianity. But sometimes that conflicts with what I went to school for as a mental health counselor, right? Whatever that may look like. So even in the sense of that's how I parent, I still have a space on the side where I say welcome anyone. And when I mean welcome anyone, in the sense that I'm not shunning anyone, all right? By no means. And I think that's one of the privileges I have by having the experience from more than just a religious or spiritual background. So I'll just put the period there, and I look forward to hearing how the others answer that. Thank you, Mr. Wiley.
Oh, thank you again, Mr. Bosley. Mr. Watley, you're up.
So here's the thing. When you ask a child between 1 and 11 who knows them best, they'll usually say their parents, mom or dad, because they have that connection. If you ask a teenager, it's usually their best friend. So what happens when you lose that connection from your child is they go into the essence of experimentation when you talk about the moral and the sexual side of things. Young people don't see sex today the way we viewed it when we were growing up. We were at a middle school where they caught a bunch of young kids in the bathroom experimenting, boys on boys, girls on girls, boys and girls, the whole 9 yards. They look at it differently because of what media has shown them. So if you never have that conversation with your teenager, don't think they're not having that conversation, they're just not having it with you. So if you're not raising them in the open to be transparent, Then when they shut that door and they turn that TV on, they're starting to wonder, why does every show have to have a same-sex relationship? Why is sex such an issue every time I turn on the TV or open a magazine or turn my computer on? There must be something into that. Why do young people equate sex when it comes to getting to know each other versus even knowing their last name and seeing what somebody's about? I think the conversations we don't have are the conversations that hurt us. I wasn't raised in a household that my mom sat down and had a conversation with the birds and bees. It was because other young people started having these conversations about sex that it was introduced to me. So the moral compass has to be, as Mr. Bosley said, it has to be displayed for us, but then we have to know that, okay, she's 13, she's 12, we have to sit down as mom and dad and have this conversation, because one of the things that I find from young people is they equate sex with love, and it's not. And that's one of the things that gets our young ladies in trouble, because, oh, I love him so much, and if I have sex with him, he's gonna stay with me. And it has nothing to do with the foundational truths of the relationship, especially when you look at it from a biblical standpoint. It has to do with what she sees in that man and what she must do to attract that man. And then our boys look at it as conquerors. Well, I've slept with this many girls and I've got these notches on my belt, but that's not a badge of honor that you come and tell your dad about. It's just something you brag among your boys about. So there is a moral divide when it comes to having the right conversations and how we talk to our young people, so they understand, one, let me value myself and my body, but then also let me value those that I'm coming in contact with. But that starts at home. But a lot of times we don't have the right home environment to have the conversation. So I'm back to social media. So I'm back to the TV. So I'm back to experimenting with my friends. And that changes how I start feeling. But then when I get old enough and have a relationship, I can't even function in that relationship because it was never displayed properly to me. If you look at the divorce rate on the southeast side of Fort Wayne, which is high, Mr. Bosley knows it, there are fewer people getting married now than ever before. Why is that? Because it's easy to walk away from a relationship when you make me mad. I don't care if we have kids. I don't care what the issue is. I'm just done with it. So my moral compass is already low because of what I'm seeing displayed. But it's not just for now. It's the fact that it started early. Nobody ever got it off of me, and now it's showing up later in my life. Mr. Riley?
Yes, good job. Very well said. Mr. Green.
Okay, yes, I'll have to kind of teeter with Mr. Bosley. I'm probably the second youngest on this panel, and I'm actually in the midst of this right now with a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I think, but I also, my approach to this now, especially with my 10-year-old, is what Mr. Wiley says about just the transparency and making sure where I want to take this with them is making sure that they can come to me for absolutely any topic of conversation that they want to hit. It can be the tough ones, the easy ones, but I want them to be open and comfortable to come to me. And I even say this, I've said this as young as since they can talk, like, you come to mommy, you come to daddy, because guess what? We're the first ones that can steer you in exactly where you need to be, and to educate you on exactly what you need to know. So I want to be an open book when approaching that type of stuff, and keeping the transparency along those lines when that stuff, and it's starting to surface with my 10-year-old, and it's coming, and its questions are beginning, and I don't shy away from the questions. That's just the best advice I would say, going into it, and just educating it, but also educating in a well-rounded ways. So I think that's where I'm going. That's where I'm headed right now.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Dr. Hammonds.
Oh, this is an interesting topic right now. Let's be clear. As the one who does not have biological children, let me tell you that oftentimes, and I'm the only of 5 kids that don't have children now, but I am the go-to uncle to have this discussion and conversation with. And so that does speak to what Mr. Watley talked about. who are they going to speak to, right? So how are we laying the table before them? How are we training them up in the way they should go? You know, these are sayings that we hear so often in the Black family, and that is true. So they're going. Your children are going to go to whom they're comfortable with having these conversations. That's period, and that's the end. All right. Now, the other thing is I truly believe that we should be more of the instigators in instigating these conversations, or initiating, I should say, these conversations. And that's something we don't find comfortable doing, because you want to make sure that you get it right. Right? I don't want to mess this up for my kid the rest of their lives. And so I know I consider myself an Orthodox Baptist. I've grown Baptist born, Baptist bred. When I die, I'm a Baptist dead, folks. Grew up in the church. I am also a chief diversity officer. I am also very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I am one of those people that Bosley and Watley and maybe even Green say you probably shouldn't listen to when it comes to this area, because my belief somewhat differs my religious and spiritual belief differs than it doesn't always align with reality of what I'm teaching, I should say. Let me say it. So I live by these 3 quotes. The first quote I learned when I was in 6th grade on the back of my report card, and that quote is, "The choices you make today shape your world tomorrow, author unknown." The choices you make today shape your world tomorrow, author unknown. So no matter what you do sexually, there's going to come a consequence. You choose, right? And that's going to be your choice, right? Daddy, mom can't do anything about it, because you at that moment will make that choice. And so the choices you make today shape your world tomorrow. 2 quotes that I coined myself in 2016. The first one is, "You do not have to lose self to support others." You do not have to lose self, who you are, the Baptist in me, the religious person in me, the spiritual person in me, to support others, the individuals who may not love the way I love, right? Who may not see things the same way that I see things. Okay. And then the last one, my pastor friends and I get into it a lot about, is this quote: "More than one truth can exist in a space and function." Again, more than one truth can exist in a space and function. Now, for us religious people, there's only one truth. I know it. Oh, hello. So I give you the option, if appropriate, to insert identities. More than one identity can exist in a space and function. Sometimes it's a little more palatable to my preachers, okay? And so there's identities that, think about it, at your churches, at your homes, in your own house, between your children. There's certain identities, there's different identities, and we still can get along, we still can function, we still can be productive citizens, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a couple things that I'll say about that. In our formative years are so different now. Back in the day, we used to look at formative years at between 10 and 15. That's when our kids are really formulating who they are and becoming who they are and experimenting with sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. Well, guess what? Those years have moved up some. Sorry, parents. Those years are almost at 7 years old. A kid determines and chooses whether or not they are a male, a female, a man, a woman, a transgender at 7 years old, right? So now some of our parents, some of our Black men are now having to learn a whole nother language. What are you talking about? Transgender. What are you talking about? All of this extra stuff. No, in our Bible, in our church, in our home, you're either this or that, and I'm gonna make that choice for you, right? And so again, that's the space and the place we're in as we're growing and as we're raising kids, and as we are a community and a village raising kids, we do have to do our own work to really know what our kids are going through, so that we can talk to them and not at them. But we have to know what they're going through. So I'll just leave with saying, Maya Angelou said, to know better is to do better. And so as we continue to know better, we have to align our behaviors, men, fathers, with what's out there, right? Now, I don't tell nobody what to do in their own house, because I'm not IRS. But I will say that this is what your children are going through. This is what they come to me as uncle, right? and have this conversation. And then I have to go to brother or sister and say, hey, listen, I had a confidential conversation with, you know, your son, my nephew, or your daughter, my niece, and I just want to give you some tools to help you do what you do. I ain't telling you what to do, but here's some tools, my brother, my sister, to help you do what you do. So we have to continue to learn as we do, as we learn, grow, and act together.
I agree. It's a comment. It says, if we don't talk about sex with our children, the world will.
Right.
Yes, and we want to talk to our kids about sex. I do. I definitely do. And I remember growing up in a household where my mom didn't talk about it a lot either at all. And I just kind of want to open that up more. You know, I just want to make that a safe space for my family, for my kids to keep the conversation going, wherever it needs to go.
And they're watching. They're watching.
Yes.
Our kids are watching. They're watching us. They're watching how we interact with others, what we say about others, who we allow to come into our houses and our spaces and our places, and what you're watching on TV, right? The side conversations that you're having with your friends, they're listening to that. They hear it. They do.
Thank you for such great answers. This has been a great discussion, very powerful. Our last question, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then you could unmute yourself and ask your question directly. But when it comes to mental health, what do you do for self-care? And from your perspective, what would a perfect world look like in our community for you and your family? And let's start with Dr. Hammonds.
Listen, I'm going to defer to all these mental health folks that we got on this call. I'll just quickly say that what I do for mental health is literally just, I love family, right? And just chatting with family, talking to folks really helps me to just kind of decompress. I also like to read and eat healthy and sleep. And so those are just some surface things that I like to do. Now, what I do say to other folks is that, you know, folks are put on this earth to assist and to help. And some folks are called to do just that, and lean in and allow them to do that, right? Trust them and be guided by them. And it's not, I mean, quit saying it's taboo for us to go to mental health specialists and therapists. Yeah, it's taboo because we continue to make it taboo. But now, you know, that I hear so many people talking about, oh, my therapist said. You know, as we lead with those declarative statements, as we're really putting it out there that Black people do see therapists, that Black people do take in consideration their mental capacity and their health and their well-being, it becomes a little bit more normal. And so again, I'm going to defer to my brothers that do this work on a day-to-day basis. I have no other tips to say that. I'm probably going to call one of them afterwards to get have some discussion anyway. So there it is.
And from your perspective, what would a perfect world look like in your community for you and your family?
For me, a perfect world for systemic racism is gone. Folks are living their best life. They're being able to be their authentic selves, showing up wherever they go as who they are. And acknowledged it's equity, it's equitable that folks are being paid what they deserve and what they're worth. And yeah, to me, for my family, no COVID and sickness of any nature. I just wish we could just live this perfect life and sing gospel music all day, every day, and eat, eat and be merry. That's a perfect life. And that the kids grow up and they make money for their Uncle Tezzy. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Mr. Bosley.
Yeah, great answer, Dr. Hammonds. I would say for mental health, of course, I'm a mental health counselor, so I was looking forward to this question, but it's very simple. I would say during this COVID, as Gary identified, this is what week 51 of really working in this virtual space. I would say for me, I'm very intentional about every morning I'm listening to something motivational on YouTube. For no matter what mood, I have identified a speaker that can speak life into me. And I do that even on the good days. So I'm very intentional about that. Another thing that I do for self-care, I like reading. But one of the things that Dr. Hammonds mentioned that I personally don't think we give enough attention to is allowing our walls to come down so people can speak life to us. I think the people on this call, definitely on this panel, is oftentimes we are that escape person for someone else, right? So much so that we don't ever create a space for someone to return the favor. All right. And I know we like pouring out, but at some point, someone got to pour from us. If not, we're going to be running on empty. So it's so important that a part of self-care is that you make sure you prioritize not being empty, not reaching the point of being empty. And then it's more with mental health. I like journaling. And of course, I'm going to promote going to therapy. Even if it's not to me, I'll say just get you a therapist. Don't be discouraged, even if you find one and it doesn't work out. No, keep going until you find someone, okay? Because it's needed, it's needed. And then the question in regards to a perfect world, everything that Dr. Hammond said, but I would add what Dr. Martin Luther King was quoted for in his whole I Have a Dream speech. One of the things, and I still try to recite it, was when he says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So in the perfect world, in addition to everything Dr. Hammond said, would be, let's add that piece that we could get to a space that before, just get to a space where I'm judged by my character versus what I look like by my complexion. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said. Mr. Green.
Mental health. I would have to say for me, for some surface things, it's like one thing, it's the small things for me. And when I wake up in the morning, I have to make my bed. And I feel like when I make my bed, it just continues the day smoother. It just does. I don't know why. And I don't even like really making my bed. But I find that if I didn't make my bed, like my day is just kind of like something isn't right, you know? So to do that for myself mentally, it just helps me. It's just the small things like that that just keeps me moving. And then also family, like my family, my wife, my kids, we are extremely close. Like, and we've been kind of fortunate and blessed to be able to actually, you know, basically all work together because of the business that we do have. And we're constantly with each other, and we're okay with that. And this is prior to COVID, you know, we were always with each other, and that's just something we truly, truly enjoy amongst all of us. And so we feed off of each other to help, you know, motivate each other mentally, and also keeping that conversation open. Like one of my sons, he suffers with anxiety, you know, terribly. And I had to catch myself in the beginning of when I started to notice this. It's like, what do you need anxiety for? You have a great life. You know, everything's great for you. You know, you like, it's perfect. Like I looked at his life, I'm like, your life is perfect. What's wrong? And so, but I had to catch that. And so we find other tools and we keep it open. I wanted to make him comfortable to tell me when that feeling started to come again. And it comes like clockwork too. And so just keeping that open mind and letting him know that he is free to tell me, you know, how he feels, and me not having judgment and trying to dismiss it, or just even saying, of course, this is a tool that we use to pray with it. Pray, don't just pray it away, you know, it's just, that's a tool to help with it, with your anxiety. You know, let's pray on this. Let's talk, let's ask God for some direction. But not to just use it as, oh, pray about that, you'll be all right. So I try to do that along with all of our family when it comes to our mental health. And for me, it's just truly, it is making my bed, being with my family constantly, which is okay for us. And then I'm reading. I'm starting to read a lot more, something inspirational, something where I can see, like, man, I can do that. You know, I've been reading Barack Obama's memoir lately. I'm like, whoa, he was really just a normal person. And he became like the leader of the free world. Like, that's insane to me. So that's just something like that just truly helps my mental health for sure.
Mr. Wiley.
This to me is probably the most important question, along with what Mr. Bosley said. What does mental health look like if it doesn't change you? And he mentioned a couple segments ago, The Man in the Mirror from Michael Jackson. I had a conversation with God years ago, and I asked him, basically I asked him, I said, do you know me? You know, the Bible says he knows the hairs on her head and this, that, and the other, but I asked him, did he know me? And it shook me to my core, because he said, no, I don't know this version of you. The version of you that standing here is not the blueprint that I made. And it started me on this Mecca and this journey, and was called a reactive lifestyle. What happened was I went through this training, and somebody took me back to my childhood to get my DNA back. So as I mentioned earlier, my mom raised 7 kids, and I didn't know who my dad was. So how that negatively impacted me when my 4 siblings underneath me have the same dad. They knew him, he was active in their lives, but when he came around, he treated me different. Then to come and find out that their dad wasn't even married to my mom, he was married to somebody else. So how does that equate to changing my DNA? So fast forward, I go through this reactive lifestyle training, and I start to understand that I experienced rejection, emotional abuse because of the situations then. Now, when I am a dad, because I'm trying to be their friend versus their parent, I am overcompensating because of that pain that I had. The other thing, because a true marriage wasn't displayed in front of me, I didn't know how relationships were supposed to accurately work. So if we are going to be the versions of who we are, first we got to understand that we got some bags on us that were not ours. Something or something got attached to us that's not ours. So I went back and I started untaching these bags. And then what made it so crucial was I got the same sheet, and I gave my family a journal as well. And I said, look, this impacted me, but I didn't give you the best father you're supposed to have, didn't give my wife the best husband she was supposed to have, and explain to them why and how these bags got attached to me, and then show them that I was taking them off to be the best version of myself. And then I encourage them to do the same thing. Here's your sheet, here's your journal. Show me what your triggers were that negatively impacted you so that we can help navigate to that, so you're not duplicating the same process, because a lot of times you're acting like you know who you are and you don't even know that your DNA got changed. You're acting in a way that is subsequently different than what God had ordained for you to be. It's because something or somebody played a part in your life. It was mind-blowing for me because I thought I had it together, until I really realized that my body and my mind had guarded me from some things that negatively impacted me early on. So to go back and change that was dramatic for me. And now it also affected the positivity of my family. So now we can all heal and move forward. So I tell everybody all the time, I don't care what the effects are if we never identify the cause. So my main goal is, when I wake up every morning, God, give me enough that I'm always ministering out of excess and not the necessity. I want my cup overflowing so that it's never empty, that it affects me anymore. When you talk about what a perfect society looks like, it's simple. And we love like Christ. Christ had 12 fellows walking around, and one of them he knew was going to do him harm. One of them he knew was going to sell him out, and the others never could tell who it was. Can you love like that? Can you only love the people that are patting you on your back and saying, well done? Or can you go beyond of you to show somebody the true nature of who you're supposed to be? With that, Mr. Riley, I am done.
Thank you, Mr. Watley. That will preach for somebody to love like Christ. And you truly love that way. It's time to open it up to our listening audience. If you have any questions, you can put your questions in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask your question to our panelists. Any questions? Any questions?
I'll go ahead. I always go first. How's everybody doing? Great job, gentlemen. I enjoyed listening to you all. My name is Farida, and I'm a student at Ivy Tech. And a couple things kind of I want to ask a question, but I actually want to kind of say something because this is really close to my heart, this matter, this subject. As a woman that is an African-American woman, well, mixed and raised in the African-American community. I'm from Chicago, the South Side. So you get to see a lot of on-hand men firsthand. I don't need to paint the story. Everybody have an idea of Chicago. And there's some good things about Chicago also. But mentioning, someone made the point about referencing about in the homes, mentioning about the homes and the foundation of homes and how people are wanted to succeed and your parents are blocking you. And then we also mentioned the part of this world being racist. But if it started in the homes, then a lot of things can kind of, you know, if I have a parent that love me, if I have Mr. Green mentioned about how he loved his children, and I know how he loved his children. If you love your children that way, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And although you walk through the valley of death, you should not fear any evil. But Ephesians chapter 16, verse 12 said, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of the evil in the heavenly realms. So when all of this stuff started going on, I had to really I had to realize that it was the enemy, because I've been with white people. I even have some small white in my DNA. I have Spanish in my DNA. Then I said, it's the devil that wants me to figure that it's a racist world. But I get it as a man, how we're being judged and and the people out there judging us for our color. But I realize it's it's people that are racist. And then also in the communities, it don't make it any better because you're getting your backlash from your brother. You want to make progress and then someone is hating on you. So I had to go back to that scripture to realize it's the devil. So the question I wanted to ask you all, and anyone can chime in, regarding the mental health, because I'm not going to say everybody got all their tens and all their dots in a row, but what suggestions can the community of healthy brothers go back and give the brothers out there to help them move forefront? Because there's a lot of men out there in jail and a lot of women out here are struggling, one parent household. I'm not saying other communities don't that have them, but what can the men do that's in the African-American community to spread this mental health to the other brothers so they can start healing so it can be better households out here for women and not struggling out here taking care of kids by themselves and things of that nature. I'm not going to say the women don't need any help. That's another subject. But for now, we're talking about the men. What can the men do to help the ones that's healthy, spread this love to the next man, if it's present ministry or if it's, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Okay, panel.
I just want to jump in before the scholars, the real scholars on here and experts start talking and blow me out the water. Let me just quickly say thank you for the question. Yes. And thank you for the question. And not only thank you for the question, I'm not going to push back, but I'm going to add something, and maybe they can answer this while I'm helping you with this question. Me too. Number one, I want to caution to say that some brothers have arrived and some brothers haven't. We're all on this journey, and we all do show up in different places and spaces. And so I just want to put that out there, right? Because sometimes when we say, when we kind of categorize folks as healthy brothers versus those who are, have some type of mental health improvement area of improvement, it kind of is the stigma again, right? They're like, okay, some healthy, some not. What does that look like, etc. Now, my brothers may tell you that's black and white, and it's just black and white. But I just want to caution that because we're all on a journey. Number one. Number two, I would also like to just comment about horizontal hostility. Look that up. Horizontal hostility is when you're talking about some brothers within brothers are having conflict, and we're family. We are a big family, and we're going to have some insider conflicts, and there are going to be some things that we go through. So I want to add to her question, not only what skills and what should brothers be doing to motivate and encourage other brothers to seek help, but then also what are the ones who are doing all of this work? What should we be doing to stay refueled, energized to do this work? So her question, plus mine, scholars.
Mr. Bosley, it sounds like you're up, but I'll tag you in because here's the thing. When women get together, they're emotional and they have a tendency to release all of that pent up emotion, and it's easy to talk. Because Black men are historically strong, we don't show our emotions. We don't hug like Mr. Green does and kiss his kids, and we shut everything in. The key to breaking down that wall that you mentioned is got to be transparency. Because if I'm driving around and I've got a bunch of hats in my back seat that I put on depending on where I'm at. Okay, I got to put my church hat on because I'm this to the church people. I got to put my job hat on because I'm this to the job people. Now I'm pulling in my driveway. I got to put my husband hat on because I'm this to my wife. Okay, I'm going out with the kids. I got to be this because I'm dad to my kids. And there's no level of transparency. It's just me having these different levels of who I think I am in those different situations. But what happens when a group of Black men get around each other and they say, you know what, I was a drug addict and let me tell you how I got healed. I was an alcoholic. Let me tell you how I got healed. I was once divorced, but let me tell you how I got healed. The thing about us is we shut our mouths when it comes to getting to a certain place when we got somebody's answer in our mouths. And Black men they're notorious about being quiet, and I know Mr. Bosley can speak to this when it comes to their emotions and feelings. But a lot of times, even when the Bible talks about we're overcome by the blood and the power of our testimony, we forget that B part. We don't want to tell anybody what we are because on Sunday when I'm at church and I've got my suit on, everything's looking right. I don't want somebody to judge me. When I get around a bunch of brothers and say, hey, I need you to pray for me because I'm struggling in this area, and they're looking at me like, oh, I thought you already had it all together. This is very surprising to me. And now that hurts my manhood. That hurts my demeanor, and I can't be out there swinging hard because somebody's seeing me soft. And to me, that's the biggest misnomer that we have to break down. When Farida was talking about how do we get past those barriers that we put up ourselves? We become so hardened that we can't even let anybody else in. And I'll let you go from there, Mr. Bosley, because I know you chomping at the bit there.
I don't know about that, Mr. Wiley. You hit it right on. But I'd like to add, one, like you guys have stated, great question. And thank you, Dr. Hammonds, for adding to it. I would say, again, there's no clear-cut answer, but from where I sit at, this is how I would answer that. And I'm going to use a spiritual undertone with what I share, okay? I believe when, number one, the answer is love. Let's just say that. Love. When I love a person, I naturally don't want to see them suffer. So even if I make it, I'm going to go back to get them because my love is going to call me back, right? But I look at the formula, and it's what Mr. Wiley stated was this. He said authenticity, and it's very good because if you look at Jesus, oftentimes after he performed the miracle, he instructed people to, hey, go back. But when you go back, don't just talk about what I've done, but really share your testimony, where I brought you from. Does it make sense? And in order for me to share my testimony where he brought me from, I have to be authentic. I have to mention that, hey, I ain't always looked this good. Does it make sense? And so what it requires for us is to become more aware of the process, become more aware of our journey. Does it make sense? And in our process of becoming more aware of our journey, meaning the transformation, it becomes easier to go back and tell people, hey, this is how I transform. Does it make sense? I'll feel more comfortable with telling people, hey, this is where I was, and now this is where I'm at. And this is what I dealt with along the way. And I think a lot of times what takes place is because of our lack of awareness of the process, we're not confident to go back and share like, hey, this is where I come from. Not so much because we don't want to, simply because we never had practice talking about that area. Does it make sense? So again, like I stated at the beginning of the call, when I'm silent, someone else will fill in the blank. And oftentimes how they fill in the blank of this person don't care. This person doesn't, this person is too arrogant. They got it here now. They don't care about us no more. No, it's not even arrogance. Maybe there's an insecurity where I haven't necessarily become comfortable with my voice when it's talking about a weak area. Does that make sense? So literally, we have to become comfortable in sharing our testimony. right? Because when other people hear that, you know what, I'm not the only person that's unhealthy. Because truth is, nobody on this call is perfect. So none of us have reached a plateau or a place where we can honestly say, oh, I got it all together. I dot all my I's and cross all my T's. No, like you stated, Mr. Hammonds, it's a journey for us all. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So
I have a quick question, a follow-up question while you're going. So talk to me, the atheist, me, the agnostic.
That's good.
What an example that me, the Black male that's twice removed from church because church didn't work for me.
Yeah.
What would you say to me as I'm going out to talk to some of my other friends or talk to some of my other children or what have you? Because I'm always trying to give both, you know, because I know you know. So how do we talk to those brothers as well?
Yeah. So let me say thank you for that. Okay. So I was fortunate enough at 21 moving to Fort Wayne, didn't know anybody, and thrown into the rescue mission, working with a bunch of homeless gentlemen that literally 8 out of 10 of them didn't believe in Christianity because they was upset with God. Right. But in the process of still having the conviction of sharing my faith, I figured out how to necessarily talk to them. Meaning this, I would keep the same formula. Because literally, if I believe or don't believe, I can't discredit or dismiss the formula of Jesus saying, once you've been transformed, go back and just speak your truth. So literally, if you don't believe, I'll simply say this. All right, let's not mention Jesus, but we still can include his teachings. Does it make sense? So how my answer to the situation is still the same. It's simply this, is that once you make it, when you go back, don't talk just about being on the mountaintop, but share the valley.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And in the process, you'll be more effective talking about the trials and emotions you experienced in the valley. It'll literally be more effective than you sharing the testimony of how you conquered and now you're on top of the mountain.
In essence, you speak to the audience the way the audience expects to be spoken to. You get on the level of that. Yeah, you get on the level of the person so that they can hear you. Because again, what I found in diversity, equity, and inclusion is some folks are distracted by the noise that they can't hear the message.
Yeah.
And so if we can do our best with getting away with the noise, some noise to some people may be the trauma they had with being a Christian, or the trauma they had with you know, masculine toxicity, the trauma they have with X, Y, and Z, and that becomes the noise that distracts them from the goal at hand. And so what I say to the folks on this call and this workshop, and especially to my sister who asked that question again, is sometimes we have to help folks get through the noise. When we can help them get through the noise, then they can get to the what's really the meat at what we're trying to get them to understand. And that is that we are better together. We're trying our best to do our best. You know, we all fall, and sometimes we don't take the path less traveled or the path best traveled. We take the path less traveled, and that's good too. And so, but we're not trying to talk over your head. We're trying to talk to you, because we want what's best for this community. We want what's best for the Black family. We can't do that without everyone. I say this all the time about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? It's everyone's responsibility, but it's no one's charge. And when it's no one's charge, therefore it lacks responsibility and it lacks accountability. And what we need in this work are some people who would say this work is a part of who we are and not a burden to what we're trying to do. Right. And so that's the way I look at it. And again, they man, y'all good. Y'all some good people over here.
Once again, we thank you for joining us today for this very thought-provoking discussion. Again, our theme was Black family, identifying the myths and systemic issues that have shaped the narrative of Black men and as fathers. And I think we are all better for having this discussion today, and we're making one step in the right direction, making huge strides in this thought-provoking discussion. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Carrie Knuth, who will do a drawing.
All right, thank you. And I you know, I mean, we're at our time, but I do want to point out that we want to be sensitive of your time here, but after we do our drawing and how I show how you guys how to track your participation and get in for the next drawing, you know, anybody who wants to stay on and continue the conversation, we want to welcome that. I just want to make sure and give those people the opportunity to participate in the drawing who do have to take off. So real quick, so today's event is having a live drawing for participation. We are giving away a $50 gift card to Barnes & Noble. Lots of people here today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have entered everybody into the drawing wheel. So we have all of our people on here, lots and lots of people. We're going to go ahead and click to spin to find our winner. And Cynthia is not here. Cynthia's not here. I forgot to take her name off. So I'm going to spit again. All right, here we go again.
Do, 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 do.
Look at that. Mr. Chris Dowse is our winner for today. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, so I know how to get a hold of Dowse. That's no problem. I'll get him his prize winning. Everybody else who is on the call today, we are going to enter you in for the next drawing, which is two $25 gift cards to Chipotle, along with everybody else who is watching this on the recording. So in order to do that, I know a lot of the people who are on the call today, I can probably find information to make sure that you're logged correctly, but there are a few people that I don't know. And in order to tell me that you were here today, we do have this little way to do that. So this is for lots of people, and also the people who are watching this on the video, to show me that you were here today so that we can get you entered into that drawing. All you need to do, this link down here at the bottom, you just throw this into your web browser. It's the link.ivytech.edu, join FWBHM. You can throw that link into your web browser, or you can click this QR code, which is the same exact link. So you can either do the link or you could do the QR code, and it will automatically take you to Ivy Life, which is our platform for events. And you'll see a little blue ribbon at the bottom of the screen that says your participation for this event has been logged. So as long as you're signed into Ivy Life. So that's all you have to do is just put this link in the web browser, or snap this QR code, and it will tell me that you've participated today, and we'll get you in for the next drawing. With all that, anybody who is still on the call, if we want to open up any more conversation, if we want to add in any additional comments. I know I had a few things I wanted to add that we didn't get to share today. So anybody else, Christopher, if you are on here, if you want to share any information with our panelists, or if they have to leave. I know we lost a few people.
Yes. Did anyone have any additional comments or additional questions for our panelists?
Hey, I just wanted to say, the panel was awesome, and I'm just tickled pleased to see Kenneth. I know him as Apple, but he goes by Kenneth. Just to see the fine young man this guy has become. He's amazing young guy, and his family, and just awesome to see him and to hear his stories. And I think back upon when I met him as a young man, and the potential. And I do remember the conversation that we had.
Yeah.
I knew this guy was going to make it, and we made sure, even though we was in Fort Wayne, we made sure that the people at IU took care of him and was going to get him to graduation, and he accomplished that. And so proud of him, but I'm also proud of everybody else. I really enjoyed it, and I need to come and hang out with Mr. Wiley whenever you have your master class to teach. I know me and Raphael's going to be there, so you just let us know the time and date. We'll be there for the master class.
Appreciate you, Mr. Dowse. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Ms. Alvarez. This was truly probably long overdue, and something that we hopefully don't wait too long to have again. I don't care how much God you know, but if you don't show God, you really don't know God. So this to me was a testament to what we can do when we all get on the same page. So Ms. Alvarez, thanks again for inviting me. I really appreciate it. The other panelists, outstanding. I'll sit on any panel with any of you anytime, and I definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, me too. Thank you guys.
Before
Yes,
everybody oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, I just want to say on behalf of the Diversity Council and on behalf of Ivy Tech, we truly appreciate each and every one for sharing your time, your thoughts, your wisdom. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We appreciate you.
Awesome.
Appreciate the opportunity and thanks for inviting us Purdue Fort Wayne folks over. I had a few folks I had on the call, so it was good to see them coming to support as well. So that's always good. I'm across the bridge.
Yeah, this
You
was
all have a
fun.
great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you
guys.
guys.
Have a great day.